Do Americans really believe that they saved Europe in WW2? British intelligence, American steel, Russian blood. Having a fresh American armed forces enter the fray after Europe had been pounding itself for 34 years certainly would have a positive effect on the Allied side. I think we shouldn't ignore the American contribution. While a lot of it is a bit overblown sometimes, it still was a major commitment to the war effort. But that also doesn't mean we can ignore everybody else. All of the Allies before 1944 contributed majorly to the war effort. Just Europe? No. We saved our galaxy from a mortal mecha Hitler. I think that yes. Americans believed they saved Europe in WW2. It's true that without the US the war would likely have a different outcome. However, many countries can legitimately claim this. I believe it would be incorrect to frame it as victory was solely due to US contribution. I think it's a fact that the American effort helped win the war. The US did not suffer as much as the other allies. Also, after the war, the Marshall Plan helped to rebuild Europe, even former enemies, and set the stage for lasting peace. Also, nukes. Saved alone? Absolutely not. But did the Americans greatly contribute to the outcome of WW2 on the Western Front? Well, can anyone argue that? It's pretty difficult to rewrite history. But propaganda aside, I think that without American intervention in the form of industrial and military support, Great Britain likely falls. Without a strong Western front to divide Axis resources and without America to occupy Japan's war efforts, the USSR falling is a very real possibility. Remember that this isn't the Cold War-era nuclear-armed USSR we're talking about. They were ill-equipped and basically throwing bodies away to close the technology gap. Look how much Russian blood was already spilled with the situation as it was. Yes, resistance movements would have always existed across Europe, but that doesn't represent nearly the same level of threat that an equipped enemy military with artillery, armor, and an air force possessed, particularly prior to the Geneva Conventions, where you could basically commit atrocities to cow most of the population into submission if the resistance ever got too bad. Many countries were instrumental in defeating the Axis powers, and the war effort falls apart if you remove any of them. The main difference for Americans is that this wasn't something happening on American soil, nor was it an existential threat to America as a nation. Yes, Pearl Harbor was a serious attack, but Hawaii is basically in the middle of the Pacific Ocean and a far cry from the continental U.S. This is why America's role often becomes framed as saviors, rather than simply another in countless countries fighting for their sovereignty and survival. To be clear, the only country the U.S. had to fight was Japan. They could have ignored the Western Front completely, but they didn't. U.S. entering the war massively tipped the scales for the Allies. And a lot of that was due to the U.S.'s logistics, material, and equipment. I don't know if we can say the Allies would have lost without the U.S. But it did end the war much sooner than it would otherwise and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. You have to look past your political bias and look at the facts. And that goes for all sides. Without America, Hitler wins. But he also wins without Russia. He also wins without Great Britain. All of those countries were needed. Other allies helped. But the war is lost without those three. Passive-aggressive ask question. I believe the world was saved in World War II. By America? No. By the Allies? Yes. I'm British and patriotic, but I'm also smart enough to know that without American help we could not have taken back Europe. Lol. The way your question is phrased makes it sound like they weren't needed, which is just ignorant to be honest. Not single-handedly. We were instrumental in the raid of Normandy. We lost 141,000 lives in Europe alone. We were fighting on two fronts, Europe and the Pacific. Why can't we all agree that everyone involved was needed? We were all one team, and that team beat the Nazi scum. Raised fist, light skin tone. I dunno. I think the Marshall Plan moved its recovery forward by at least a generation. They do because they did. More American soldiers died in WW2 than British soldiers. Or French soldiers. There are no other Allied country who lost more soldiers in WW2 than the US except for the USSR. Europeans forget that we were fighting on two fronts. It is hard to see how the Allies could have won without the UCs. Our money and our technology was the Allies' arsenal. But we also lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Do non-Americans really believe they could have won without America? I have a degree in history, and I think this question is intentionally ignoring a lot. One, there was not a whole lot of reason America even needed to join the European front. Which the invasion of Normandy, which was mostly American, really did change the tide of the war. What the rest of Europe did was impressive and costly. Let's not pretend like America did not need to provide the level of commitment it did in Europe, and let's not underplay the cost in American lives as well as the power it added for the Allied powers. If America didn't join the war, Allied very likely would not have won. It's important to realize that America really needed to only fight in Japan, and that a lot of Americans perished as a result. America didn't single-handedly save Europe as in the whole war, but let's not downplay the massive impact here.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.